Okay, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby rise from the closed session and declare the regular meeting convened at 5:28 p.m. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Collins.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of coming out of closed?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm reading that 1416C has to.
Okay, we're just letting some of the public in. We have someone on the line on the telephone with a 416-605 telephone number. Could you please identify who you are?
Try that again.
There's someone on the call with a 416-605 7075 telephone number. Could you please identify who you are?
Hi, it's Blair Sinclair. It's
Okay,
Louise
great.
Sinclair.
Okay. We appreciate your patience in waiting. Thank you, Blair. We were expecting you. So we have a couple motions, resolutions we need to deal with, and then we'll get on with the business. I apologize to Oscar, Blair, and Jason for waiting. So we have a motion. This is motion 2020-348, was moved by Ted Collins and seconded by Art Coles. It was amended and deferred to October 5th. So I'll read the motion again. We have the option to withdraw it if Councillor Collins and Coles would like to withdraw it. We do have a motion coming forward out of the closed meeting with the 4 staff recommendations that may replace this, but I will read this motion. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby direct staff to draft a policy that would create a grandfather clause such that all issued and outstanding residential permits prior to zoning bylaw 2006-125 that took effect September 18th, 2006, would be considered closed under the Ontario Building Code unless and that all other Seguin residential properties within that period fall under the Ontario Planning Act exemption of a legal non-conforming use that applies to land, buildings, or structures, and those rights are tied to the property and not to the owner. So, Councillor Collins, this was your original motion. We had discussion in closed. Do you wish to have this voted on, or do you choose to withdraw it at this point?
I'll choose to withdraw it at this point.
Okay, and Councillor Coles, you were the seconder of that. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, so this motion is withdrawn. And here we have another motion. Yes, that council directs staff to do 4 things. A, to provide council with a breakdown of the type of open permits prior to 2006. B, to bring a plan to council on how to go forward and close those old permits, including the possibility of hiring additional temporary staff. C, to bring a date to council when staff expects that the pre-2006 open permits will be dealt with. And D, to update the best practices, item D, to include permit files for which there are no useful records. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
Seconded.
All in favor? Thank you, as carried. Thank you very much.
Whoa.
I have bylaw number 2020-103, being a bylaw to appoint Jason Inwood as Chief Administrative Officer for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin, and to repeal bylaw number 2020-053, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
Thank you. And could I have a seconder from Councillor Fellner?
I second that.
All in favor of appointing Jason as Chief Administrative Officer? Thank you. Is Jason on the call? Jason, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. It's an exciting day for all of us, I'm sure. I know my family and I are so pleased to take on this opportunity and relocate our family into Seguin Township, and we are super excited to get started. And Your Worship, I think it's fair to say that there's good times ahead. We have lots of great opportunity, and I look forward to leading your administration and operations into the future and working closely with council, with staff, and of course with the community at large. So I'm very excited. I can't wait to get started in November, and I look forward to meeting everybody and kicking this journey off.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Osborne.
Jason, welcome. And on behalf of all residents of Ward 3, I'd like to personally welcome you to the township. Good luck in the future.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I think we're all excited, Jason, and we wish you a smooth transition, and you have many of our cell phones. We're here for you, but we can't wait to get started either, so welcome. Thank
Welcome.
you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are going to move on to the adoption of 2 sets of minutes. I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the minutes of the regular and closed session meetings of Council held September 21st, 2020 as circulated. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move.
You, seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you. And that motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the minutes of the special and closed session meetings of Council held September 24th, 2020 as circulated. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Collins.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to now welcome Oscar from KPMG. I apologize, Oscar, that you had a bit of a wait, but closed meetings are hard to control. So thank you very much for the Municipal Service Delivery Review. Council has received it, and we look forward to your presentation tonight. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and no apology necessary. That's fine. I'm wondering if I may be able to share my screen.
Yes, I think the clerk has enabled it.
Yes.
You should be, have you tried?
Yeah, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Again. Got a check mark on it, so you got to put it back.
Maybe you don't want to try.
There we go.
Okay, can you,
That's a station here.
yep, there you go.
Perfect. So, Your Worship, members of council, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here to present the report on the service delivery review for the Township of Seguin. What I'm hoping to accomplish today in the presentation is to give a summary of the report that was provided, and I can appreciate it's 90-some pages long. So admittedly, it takes a bit of time to get through it, but I do want to highlight some of the key themes that have stemmed from our review, talk about some of the opportunities that we've identified for consideration by the township, the implementation approach, and then open up the discussion to council to the extent that they have any questions. So once again, the service review commenced earlier in this year. And really, as we discussed with council, there were two objectives that we were seeking to accomplish, or that we had been asked to accomplish. One was to provide an avenue to really understand the services that are delivered by the municipality and how you deliver them and why you deliver them. And lastly would be to look for strategies, to look for efficiencies and value for money. It is very evident to us, council, from our initial discussions, and as we've discussed in earlier presentations, you're not really looking for large service cuts, at least at the council level. This was more an exercise of trying to demonstrate that you're as efficient as possible, you're as responsive as possible, and frankly, that you're discharging your responsibilities as a steward of public funds as well as you can. So from a deliverables perspective, and just to recall with council, there was the inventory of the township services that were prepared. So in to the report are service profiles that provide that inventory. There was a request for us to provide benchmarking and performance indicators, which are included in Appendix B and Appendix C and Appendix D to the report, looking for opportunities for efficiencies and also a framework for the implementation of those. So from a key findings perspective, and some of this you would have seen in earlier presentations, the reality is the council and the municipality very much is locked into a range of services that most municipalities of your size either are required to deliver or traditionally deliver. So from a discretionary spend perspective, what we would consider to be pure discretionary, non-traditional spending, it's actually a very small percentage of your budget. And if you go to the Appendix B in the report, we've actually summarized your budget by category. We've talked about services that are mandatory, that are required to be delivered by virtue of regulation or legislation, and those account for roughly 70% of your municipal spend. Essential services that are considered to be necessary for protecting the public health and safety of your residents or the efficient operation of the municipality are another 12 to 13%. And so on this slide, we've just attempted to summarize the operating expenditures by basis of delivery. We've also looked to talk about it by departmental levels. So we've talked about governance, administration, protection, infrastructure, community development, and outside agencies and boards. And once again, as you can see, a very heavy weighting towards those services that are mandatory and essential. And as council, as you may recall from one of our earlier discussions, a lot of this reflects the fact that as a municipality, the range of services that you provide is actually quite limited in terms of what you offer and the breadth of what you offer. And so because of the heavy weighting towards mandatory and essential, the ability to look towards service reductions, outright eliminations or service level reductions, probably isn't as prevalent as you would see in other municipalities that are larger with a broader suite of services. In terms of the cost of services, we have compared Seguin's cost to 10 municipalities that were selected on the basis of size. 5 of them are single-tier municipalities located in Northern Ontario, and 5 of them are lower-tier municipalities located in Southern Ontario. The analysis is included in an appendix to the report, and what you'll notice is in some cases, the lower-tier municipalities, we've excluded them from the comparison because things like planning, for example, are split between the lower or the upper tier. Now, what we've attempted to demonstrate on this slide is how Seguin fares compared to the average of the comparator municipalities. So the red lines will give you an indication of the range from highest to lowest as a percentage of the average. So if you are on the average, it would be 100%. The light blue dot actually represents Seguin's position in comparison to the average and in comparison to the 10 municipalities that we've compared you against. And what you will see is that for the most part, your services are towards, the cost of your services are towards the low end. And you'll see a number of instances where the municipal costs are actually the low end of the comparator range. What you'll see is that in certain cases, the costs are a little higher, specifically with respect to land ambulance and social services. And it's the social services aspect is something that I think is interesting, because this oftentimes is driven by your assessment base. So high municipality, you'll have a high assessment, you'll have a tendency to pay more. It's also, council, what we would suggest is an important indication and a thought for, to the extent that you choose to get into a shared service arrangement. To the extent that somebody looks at you and says, yes, we would like to partner, and in order to partner, we would like to share costs based on assessment base, what this is very much is a warning that you'll pay more. Because pound for pound, proportionately speaking, you have more taxable assessment than municipalities your size. And so because of that, on the social services slide anyways, you can see where the costs are actually highest of the comparator group. We've also looked at the municipality from a corporate financial indicator perspective. So rather than talking about the cost of the services, this is actually some perspective as to how do you fare from a financial health and from a financial capability perspective. And what this really gets down to is a discussion as to the implications of financial and policy decisions that are made at the governance level. What you will see is that in comparison to the 5 municipalities that we've looked at, your numbers fare very favorably. So from a financial resources perspective, you have the highest ratio of financial assets to financial liabilities. You're towards the upper end with respect to reserves. What you'll find is you actually have the lowest level of debt, in that you have no debt. So from a financial perspective and from a capacity perspective, what you can see in your financial results is what we would consider to be a very strong financial position. And it's important to recognize, council, that in certain cases, these are point in time. So things like how much are you spending on capital and what are your grants, those will fluctuate from a year-over-year basis. But if you think about the disruption that has happened with respect to the pandemic and how it's challenged municipalities, you can see that the municipality, the township, was actually quite strong going into it. So positive aspects of the review, but one of the things that we have noted and something that we flagged in the report is there are opportunities for looking at enhancing your operating efficiencies and the level of customer service that you have. So I always say there is nothing so perfect that cannot be improved. But what we've tried to do on slide 7 is just talk a little bit about, or to highlight some of the examples that we have. So with respect to building permits and inspections, there's a very high level of re-inspections that is occurring in the township of Seguin, significantly more so than what we understand is happening in neighboring municipalities. And so what we talked about was looking at the rationale for why the re-inspections and the conditional inspections are so high, to look at potentially, is it because you're being too stringent as opposed to having issues with respect to the builders? And I will confess, council, I don't think there's one answer for all of this. I think what you'll find is there will be a range of things that contribute towards this, but we talked about a root cause analysis specifically to look at that. We did talk about work order management, and the municipality does do work order management, don't get me wrong. And it's very cognizant of the fact that staff, specifically with respect to public works, are very focused on response. But what we talked about doing was tweaking the work order management to help to ensure that performance metrics are actually followed. So this is the concept of assigning priority classifications, actually establishing a service level standard that says, I will respond to this category of work order within X number of days. Looking at how you do the reporting and potentially allowing residents to actually track their work order so that they can see how the municipality is responding to the request. From a payroll processing perspective, there is paper that is being involved in the capture of time for certain municipal departments. And what I will say is what we're seeing now is we're seeing more prevalence towards the move of electronic time capture, specifically using tablets or desktop stations, What it's intended to do is a couple of different things. One is to facilitate the data capture process and eliminate duplications and errors when it comes to inputting payroll hours, and also avoiding the need to do reconciliation, because generally speaking, when data changes form from one version to another, from paper to electronic, there is a reconciliation process that's required. It's also the concept of integrating payroll and other records into an electronic database so that you could capture multiple data points at one point, as opposed to having to have different pieces of paper. Similarly, we have identified instances where documentation is being made paper as opposed to electronic, and this is just to look at enhancing the efficiency, reducing the amount of time, reducing the risk of loss, and also the retention of documentation as well. We understand that prior to the pandemic, the municipality was looking at exactly this. We believe it's a recommendation and it's a course of action that should continue. Obviously, once things slow down to the point where you have some capacity. The other comment that we will make with respect to documentation is recognizing that what this allows you to do is not only does it drive the format for the storage of data, but also ensures adherence to your record retention policies to make sure that you're keeping data for the prescribed timeframes. The last point that we've identified from an operational improvement perspective is with respect to key performance indicators. And this is an observation. This isn't a value judgment, but what we did note during the review is this. In some cases, staff were tracking performance indicators that weren't actually performance indicators. What they were is they were measures of outcome as opposed to measures of performance. And so because of that, absent a target or absent an actual defined performance measure, it's very difficult to say, how are you doing? The second thing that we would suggest is when we looked at the performance measures, there were a number of items and upwards of 80 items that were actually being reported to council. And what we would suggest is rather than having a lot of indicators, for each department, it would be better if you focused and streamlined on those that are specifically aligned to council's strategy and to the municipality's priorities. And so we did talk about rejigging some of the performance indicators and looking at how you get better data. So this isn't the case of quantity, this is more the case of quality. And so when we look at the opportunities, and we've tried to highlight them here, they basically fall into 4 buckets. There's those that look at service level reductions, and truthfully, council, one of the things that we noted from our initial interviews is there isn't a lot of appetite to reduce services. Once again, because most of your services are actually essential, required, or traditional, there wasn't a lot that we looked at cutting. There are 2 discretionary programs that you could look to. The comment that I will make, council, is 2 things. One is, these are not a lot of money. The second point that I will make is a lot of the priorities and strategy that's built around the township is around your experience as a residential community built on water. And so these are specifically tied towards water quality. And so because of that, cutting these may not necessarily be consistent with your priorities. The second bucket that we've looked at is the case of non-taxation revenues. We do know that some councils are not necessarily too concerned about user fees. In certain instances, they view it as if you subsidize through taxes as opposed to user fees, what that does is that increases access. There are 4 examples that we've looked at, though, where we would suggest you may want to consider user fee adjustments with respect to building permit and inspection fees, planning fees, parks and recreation, and cemetery. And these are 4 municipal services where it's pretty evident where you can draw a link between the user of the service and the cost of the service. In certain cases, what we have suggested is that the municipality may choose to go to a full cost recovery, because that is typically what we've seen in other municipalities adopt as a common practice. In other cases, we're not suggesting you go to a full 100%, but rather we would suggest you may want to increase your user fee percentage upwards in order to match what other municipalities are doing. I will say, council, that those municipalities that were heavily focused on user fees felt it during the pandemic. So there is a stabilizing factor. There is a contribution towards resiliency and financial continuity by having it on the tax levy. What you need to appreciate, though, is that requires people who may not necessarily use the service to actually pay for this service. And in the report, we espouse the concept of growth paying for growth. Specifically, when you look at building services and planning services, these are areas where we believe that tie should probably a bit stronger. And then there are operating efficiencies that we've identified with respect to how the municipality does services. In certain cases, these are fairly straightforward, low-hanging fruit. So for example, looking at the stores that you have inside your public works functions and your community services functions. One of the things that we've heard from your staff, not your management staff, but your frontline staff, is they will run out of parts and they will then need to travel to Parry Sound to pick them up. And they said, you know, Oscar, that's 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, 15 minutes there. So I lose an hour and 15, an hour and 20. If we just had the parts, that's an hour and 20 that we could actually be doing work for. In other cases, there's the requirement to do a bit of analysis, to do a bit of systems implementation as well. So some of these are probably a little more immediate than others. There is a fourth category with respect to enhancing governance and performance management, where we've talked about the KPIs. We talk about some enterprise risk management instances that you have as well. So from an implementation framework perspective, council, and it would be, not to put him on the spot, but it would be interesting to get some perspective from your new CAO as to his thoughts on these opportunities and how he sees the municipality potentially going forward. And if you would like, we are more than welcome to meet with him to talk about the report, to talk about what we've seen, and really to give sort of our perspective, recognizing that he will spend time forming his own opinions. But what we have suggested from an implementation framework, and this is consistent with how we've seen other municipalities implement service reviews, is the first step is council providing direction to staff on those opportunities that you'd like to see. And so this is the concept of where you will say to staff, we would like you to adopt them, we would like you to do further analysis, or we don't think we're prepared to proceed with this. So for example, we talked about increasing user fees for parks and recreation. We talked about cutting discretionary services. If council says we have no appetite for that, we're not interested, then those come off the table automatically. What we would suggest is once that direction is provided by council to staff, staff will go through and develop an implementation timeframe. And we would suggest that there's some opportunities that could be incorporated into the 2021 budget process. So you'll have the chance to consider them as part of the budget. For those that aren't included in 2021, what we would recommend is that staff say to council, this is when we believe we can implement. This is when we're going to come back to council. And then the third point that we would suggest is that there's always a periodic update provided by staff. It could be semi-annually, it could be quarterly, it's your choice to decide, where staff will provide an update as to where you are on implementation. So for example, we've given you a list of 20 opportunities. Say that 15 are chosen by council to proceed, 5 are going to be kiboshed right off the bat. Of the 15 that are going forward, 5 are rolling into budget, 10 are subject to future analysis or implementation. What staff would be reporting on are those 10. Where are you in the process? Have you decided to move forward? Are there issues with implementation that weren't addressed in the service review that you think would require these to be pulled off the table? So it is a bit of an iterative process. There is the recognition that implementation falls to staff with communication to council. What I would also suggest, council, is in certain cases, some of the opportunities that we've identified are operational as opposed to governance in nature. And what we would suggest is that for those operational matters, it would be helpful for staff to proceed based on their insight. If you're looking at changes to funding, if you're looking at changes to service levels, if you're looking at potentially outsourcing or insourcing services, those are the types of opportunities that we would suggest require council approval. If you're looking at reviewing your inventory in your public works depots and deciding how many parts that you're going to need, with respect, council, that's more of an operational decision that staff should be able to make on their own. So, your worship, members of council, that does conclude our presentation. I'd like to thank you once again for the opportunity to be of service for the municipality. It's very clear there's a lot of things that you do well. There's also areas, much like any other municipality, where there's opportunities to potentially tweak your systems and enhance them, both from an operating effectiveness and from a customer service perspective. As I've mentioned, more than happy to meet with your new CAO to walk through the report and have a discussion about his thoughts and what we've seen. I'm always happy to be of service to the municipality. So, your worship, members of council, if there are any questions, happy to answer them at this time.
Thank you very much, Oscar. It's a very comprehensive report, and it does deserve more than one read through, I have to say. Councillor Osborne, you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Oscar. I read all 90 pages. So I'll be awaiting my gold star. The comments you've made on discretionary, you focused on septic reinspection. If we were, that's important to us because we're such a lakefront community, and I'm wondering what your alternative would be. Would we, rather than contract that ourselves, would we put the onus on another agency? And wouldn't there be a cost for that? How would we satisfy the need to inspect, but at the same time save $61,000?
Through you, your worship, the delivery of septic inspection services is required under the Building Code Act. But what it does is it mandates it to the Conservation Authority as opposed to the municipality. And I would be interested to get commentary from your staff on this, but there is the initial septic inspection, and then there's the septic reinspection is what we're talking about here, which, to be honest with you, the municipality doesn't have to do. And Councillor Osborne, to your point, when I talked about the discretionary spend, I did mention that this would run or would appear to run contrary to your priorities. And so because of that, even if you can get out of it, the question is whether you actually choose to or not.
All right, well, my question, I guess, becomes, if we were to put the onus on North Bay Mattawa to do that, would we not have fees to pay for that?
So I'd be interested to get your commentary on staff on this, but my understanding is that the septic reinspection, the every 3 years, is not actually required. So if
Really?
That's my understanding, and I could be wrong on this. So,
I'm getting some nods from the mayor there. There was a point where we talked about not using North Bay Mattawa and getting out of that business altogether. We kind of put an end to that. We maintained their services.
yeah.
But I wasn't aware of the fact that this was discretionary by us.
Councillor Osborne, I know Mr. Stone has his hands up.
Yeah,
So-
Director Stone can answer that.
And I have follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, to the rest of council. So it is discretionary. We actually provide monies to the Conservation Authority to run the program during the summer. So it is actually supervised by North Bay Mattawa. We just sort of facilitate it. We do interviews to get the staff on, provide them with the information from record searches, but it is something that the Conservation Authority deals with during the summer.
So in
But
other words,
it is something that Seguin has chosen to do that we don't need to do, neither does North Bay Mattawa, and many municipalities don't do reinspection.
well, I think Oscar just said that North Bay Mattawa would do it on a 3-year cycle.
Through you, your worship, they do the initial septic inspection, the reinspection component. Some municipalities don't do.
Yeah, I think we should be having a hard look at that on our budget talks then, Mayor. I'll move on to the next item. The building we budgeted $534 for planning services. And you mentioned about a potential annual savings of $155,000, recovery of operating costs. And this would be for new construction, I take it you're referring to, Oscar, like building permits, et cetera?
Through you, your worship, that is correct. This is the adjustment of, or the collection of full building permit costs, building permit fees and inspection fees through user fees. It's important to note, council, that in that 533 is also bylaw enforcement. So it's not just building fees, it's actually bylaw enforcement as well. And that gets down to a question as to how assertive the municipality chooses to be in terms of the collection of bylaw revenues as well.
Okay, well, I would certainly note that if we are spreading the cost of this department over our entire ratepayer base, I think we should have a good look at putting more of the financial burden on the applicants for these new buildings as opposed to spreading it through our taxation on everyone. You mentioned bylaw. Where was that figure? Was there a figure on that bylaw enforcement?
Sorry, I'm just, your worship, I have the report up. So if you go to page 20 of the report, Councillor, and I'll just share my screen.
That shows the Committee of Adjustment and Planning, page 20.
So this is, or sorry, page 19. So there's 398 for building inspection services,
Correct.
of which 358 is the user fees. The difference between the 398 and the remaining portion is your bylaw enforcement.
Okay, so roughly $40,000 then.
40,000, Councillor, and you can see on page 19 where that is. My apologies, page 20 is the planning section with the fees.
So as you're aware, we're sharing our bylaw services with another municipality. And I don't think our activity on bylaw enforcement is going to go down. If anything, it may go up with future bylaws that we create, that we're in the process of creating.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether we should be sharing services. These are contract positions, and I'm wondering if we, at this point, would be better off having in-house services. What's your opinion?
Through you, your worship, that is something that we've actually suggested. So if you go to page 5 of the report, our suggestion specifically is that you look to use your own internal staff. And the reason for that, Councillor, is very much as you've discussed, to the extent that you're going to bring new bylaws on and you have the economies of scale to maintain them, then what you would do is you would bring those services in-house as opposed to sharing. So Councillor Osborne, to your point, we've suggested that you consider exactly that.
Okay, thank you. I think that wraps it up for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Oscar, the key findings that you indicated on the screen, I don't have on my service review. Is that separate to the service review that was emailed to us?
Through you, your worship, the key findings start on page 9.
Yep, I got it.
Yep. So this slide was in the presentation.
Yes, it was.
The ad standard we've discussed about. The discussion or the comparison with the other municipalities is actually included in an appendix.
Mm-hmm.
The comparative analysis that we've talked about, your financial indicators, are included in the appendix.
Okay.
And then when we talk about process improvements, we talk about them starting on page 14, leading into page 15.
Okay.
So, Councillor Collins, we've tried to, sorry?
I never got the graphs that you had up.
No. We don't have the graphs from the appendix. I don't have it either. The ones you had up on the screen with the lines and the dots?
Yes, I never got those. I never got three pages. I was reading them because I've gone through this as well. Mm-hmm. I've gone through the 90 pages as well. So when I didn't see that, I was wondering if that was extra, and I would like to have that. That's all.
So Councillor, to your point, we've forwarded the presentation to Ms. Fraser. And so more than happy to have it distributed to council. We use the graphs to summarize the appendices. So I can appreciate why you didn't see them in the report. Happy to share the presentation deck with you. That's not.
Well, no, we got the report, Oscar. We just didn't get some of the appendices, I guess.
It's
That's
the PowerPoint presentation that Oscar used to summarize with us, and we can have it distributed as part of the, either tomorrow or as part of the minutes. It's basically your PowerPoint presentation that you used today, Oscar. If you have no problems with us circulating it, we can send it out.
It's all yours, your worship. So.
Okay. What I would like to recommend, there's a lot here, is that we refer this whole thing back to staff and to our new CAO to take a look at it. I think the timing's perfect going into the budget season. And there's some real opportunities, not only for savings, but improved customer service and improved performance measurements. So I think this is really timely and we appreciate it, but we need to get it back to staff and get it back to Jason to bring it back to us with a timeline. I see 3 hands up and then we'll move on. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to add, do we set a date to hear back from staff and Jason, like December 7th, or is it, I recognize that's only a month in or thereabouts. But we have our budget meeting in early January, so there's a few items that, you know, could or could not impact 2021.
I would say December at the earliest, since Jason doesn't start till November 2nd, but he does have a copy of the full report now. And I think the department managers are looking at their parts and will probably be doing their part where they can to incorporate them. Is that fair to say, Michelle? Yeah. So I'm looking to each department manager to take a look at what's being recommended, and let's hope we see a lot of this in the budget. But I don't want to set a date until everybody's had a really good chance to kind of you know, understand it. Councillor Collins, you have your hand. Oh,
sorry, Mayor, just as a follow-up then, should we then set it for the budget meeting in January as part of that discussion to see how these things have been incorporated in there?
Michelle, I look to you as to, yeah, we can do that. She said yes.
Okay, I just don't want it to be, I'd like to get a progress review or status update sooner rather than later. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to see how these things kind of line up with the strategic plan as well. Councillor Osborne, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Oscar, I didn't see any details or any mention of staffing levels. Was that considered in terms of your comparators with other municipalities without getting into personalities?
Yep, through you, your worship. What we had identified is your service cost delivery was comparable to other municipalities. What we discovered was, with respect to public works and community services, there's work that's being done by the municipality that in other municipalities would be outsourced. And so what you will find, Councillor Osborne, is there is a comment with respect to the use of third-party providers for the municipality in the report. What I will say is that we were advised by your staff that the availability of qualified contractors is limited and has been limited in the past. And so what you'll find is that from a staffing perspective, the issue is while other places outsource it, for lack of a better term, the reason they do is because they can. You may not be able to get that. Other than that, Councillor, from a staffing perspective, outside of that one instance, your staffing levels are comparable with, and in certain cases lower than the other municipalities. And that's reflected in the cost analysis as well, Councillor. And so that is basically what the findings from the review are.
Good, thank you, Oscar.
Thank you very, very much. It's impressive, and most of it makes us feel good in Seguin. So I have a motion here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby receives the Township of Seguin Service Delivery Review Final Report dated October 1, 2020, prepared by KPMG as attached as Schedule A to this resolution. Could I have a motion from Councillor Coles?
Also move.
And seconded by Rod Osborne.
Second?
All in favor of receiving the report? Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Oscar. And I will encourage anyone, but particularly Jason, our new CAO, to reach out to you and your team.
We are here to serve, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Clerk, do we have our second delegation?
Our second delegation was here quite a while earlier, but it's not here any longer. So I guess what we will do is we'll try and reach out to them maybe tomorrow and see if they would like to come to a future meeting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to accounts. So I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the accounts in the amount of $2,563,955.31. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner?
So move.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Collins.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of approving accounts A? Thank you. And we have a motion that, this is Councillor Fellner, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the accounts in the amount of $6,925.98. Could I have a motion from Councillor Collins?
Also move.
Thank you, and seconded by Gail Finson.
I second that.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and we go into, do I read the whole thing? Okay, just quick. Okay, I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the staff reports as presented on the agenda and addendum to the October 5th, 2020 meeting of Council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move.
You. Seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that.
All in favor of receiving staff reports. And the first one is for Michelle to tell us about.
So this is your financial update to September 24th. Again, staff are just plugging along. We are continue to see reduced rentals both at the arena and in the facilities. The ice is now in. We do have, I believe, 37 hours a week rented right now, which is a lot more than what we thought we would get. And we hope that as we move through the season that those rentals will increase. Capital continues. Again, staff are doing their best to make sure that all of the projects get finished by the end of the year. And to date, we've spent $193,000 out of our $609,000 COVID funding, of which just under $113,000 was a supplemental levy from EMS that Councillor Osborne told us about, I think, at the last meeting. So,
are there any questions for Michelle? Councillor Moffat.
I just have two questions. Michelle, you mentioned about 37 hours per week. What would be normal in terms of a rent? Like, is it 50? Is it 100? Like, are we a third or a half, or where are we with the rental in terms of hours?
I would say that we're at about half to 2/3 right now.
Okay.
We've lost most of our men's leagues.
Yeah, I know.
But we are picking it up. We've got some special rentals through the day. And it really depends. October is often pretty slow.
Yep. Okay. My second question is during Q2, we put a moratorium, or we set aside interest and penalties. And you and I chatted about that, and you said that most people were paying their taxes and really weren't taking advantage of it. I'm just wondering now that we've moved into here in October, we've had a couple payments subsequent. Are we seeing a similar pattern, or are we seeing some sort of delay or, interest and penalties being applied more regularly than what we did at the front end of what was COVID-19?
We are seeing that the tax arrears are up slightly at the end of September compared to the end of September last year. It's not enough to give me some concern right now, but we are keeping a close eye on it. We do have a couple properties in tax registration that are pretty significant that would affect that. But really, people are paying their taxes.
Okay. Maybe through you, Mayor, I'm wondering if we could maybe get an update closer to end of our meeting in November to see if there's something that we as a council should be doing with some new information like we did, back in May.
We should have some better information for you on where the arrears are coming from, because we send out our notices, our arrears notices. They've just gone out today, actually. So I'm expecting we're going to get a lot of people contacting us that if they are having difficulty, we'll try to set up some payment plans. So yeah, we can come back.
Okay. No, I just had an inquiry from a resident on it because they had only found out about it and they heard some other rumors and stuff, and I just wanted to. I presume it was on the radar, so I just want to make sure that if as a council we need to do something, we should have that information to make those decisions. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like you to come back, Michelle, and I'd love to see the split between residential and commercial as well, if we could. That I think would be very useful. Councillor Osborne?
Thank you, Mayor. Michelle, the COVID funding, we obviously did quite well. There's quite a buffer there for us. You mentioned the balance of the Safe Restart funding will go into reserve if not used. Is that there forever? This is non-refundable, correct? Or is there any cap or clawback possible from the province on this?
We actually don't have a lot of information on this funding. The province is really leaving it up to the municipalities to apply this as they see fit. So far, from what I've heard and been told in the various webinars we've been in, we'll have this through till the end of 2021 to apply to, again, whatever areas we think we need. And I haven't heard of any talk of clawback from the province.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, there's possible second wave going on, and who knows what's going to happen around Christmas. The other mention I wanted to, there was talk about using that COVID fund up to upgrade facilities within the township to touchless where possible. That could be a big spend. Has there been any initiation by our department, our staff, on taking that, actually going ahead with it?
I was actually talking to Dominique and Kenny today. They have an initial quote in for all the buildings that was an awful lot higher than what we thought it should be, but it's kind of our starting point. And given how much that would be, that will come back to council in a report before it gets awarded.
But it's going to be manageable within the funds we have, I would expect.
I believe so, yes. Okay,
and I'm sure in this day and age, those kinds of products that are premium right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for
The
finding.
top buck. Okay, thanks, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, for a very, very comprehensive report, and generally, you're on target and on budget, and thanks for doing it so well. I will go now to Director Stone for an update on the official plan process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to the rest of council. So one of the things that council has been asking for is just an update on the expenditures to date. So we were lucky enough to get an invoice from the consultant last week, and so that's reflected in the financial considerations in page 2 of the report. And the other thing too that's noteworthy in the report is just some of the observations that were made in terms of dealing with municipal affairs and housing staff. They came back with quite a large ask, if you want to say, in terms of looking at our current official plan policies. And the other thing we wanted to note was that there has been a fair bit of traffic on the consultant's website with regards to visitors to after the virtual open house. So that was good to see. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat, you have a question for Director Stone.
Yeah, just one question. I see the balance of 44,000. Are we expected to meet, exceed? What is an indication, Steve, that we will be on target for the budget, or more or less? What is your sense now?
Well, as you know, I've been concerned with the amount of budget for this project, and certainly with municipal affairs and housing's ask, that's going to require a fair bit of energy to be expended by the consulting team. So again, there hasn't been a lot of traffic from the public, so I'm hoping on that front we may not have as much back and forth discussion, but I am concerned, and that's why I have presented council with the numbers so far, so that you are aware that next year we may be asking for some additional monies for the budget.
Mayor, just to follow up, then, we do have some contingency money. At some point, do we allocate, if we see this going, do we allocate some 2020 contingency dollars to this project? And I see Michelle's.
Yeah, here I am. Generally, our official plan review is funded by a specific reserve for the official plan. So what I would suggest at the end of this year, if we do have surplus or leftover money, we could allocate money back into that reserve to then fund what's going forward next year.
Okay, it's just a matter of trying to mirror what we're doing before we hit 2021. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look to staff to make the recommendation of how
Absolutely.
much. Okay, thank you, Steve. And I've been reading some of the discussion topics. Some of them are easier to get through than others, I'll tell you that. But I think you are still on the hot seat, Director Stone, with an exemption request to blasting.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an exemption request for 39 Appledale Road. And staff visited the site just to discuss with what's going on the property with the ask. And it's safe to say that there's an existing cottage in the area where the blast will take place. The blasting is actually towards the rear wall of that existing cottage. So based on that analysis, staff is quite comfortable with the ask, and you'll see that there is a condition for the materials to be removed from the site. So that's it. Thank you.
As I understood it, none of this blasting is going to be visible from the lake.
No, that's correct.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur with Steve on this. This is very minor oversight and should be approved. Thanks.
Okay, we have a motion here, or resolution, I guess it is, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant an exemption for blasting at 39 Appledale Road, property roll number 4903-010-07800-0000 for Sinclair, pursuant to section 5.1 of bylaw number 2008-104, being a bylaw to prohibit or regulate blasting in areas of the Township Seguin, subject to the conditions as outlined in a staff report DPS-PL-2020-106, copy attached as Schedule A to this resolution. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
And seconded from Councillor Fellner?
Yes, seconded.
All in favor of granting this exemption? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair, for your patience in attending, but your exemption has been granted.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read this motion, and then we'll open it up to discussion. As per staff report number PW-RD-2020-021, copy attached as Schedule A to this resolution, and the request from George Stivrins on behalf of 1636411 Ontario Incorporated. Council does hereby direct staff to advise Mr. Stivrins that his request for permission to improve the road allowance to access his property, being part of Lot 147, Concession A, former Township of Foley, property roll number 4903-030-009-01500, requires an agreement between the property owner and the municipality and staff, or to advise Mr. Stivrins of the process to make application for the agreement. And further, the council directs staff to advise Mr. Stivrins that his request to modify the official plan requirement of full municipal services for future development requires an amendment to the Township of Seguin official plan, and to advise Mr. Stivrins of the process for applying for an official plan amendment. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat on this one?
I so move.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that.
Okay, Peter, I know you walked the property. Can you take us through this a little bit, and then we'll open it up to discussion?
Sure. Sure. I met with the parties, Mr. Stivrins and Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Mueller, and we met at the site. I had walked the site beforehand to get a perspective of what was there. It's pretty laid out in the report. I made it clear from the township perspective that the township had no interest in upgrading or building an access to the property, but would rather look into facilitating that the property owners could access their property over municipal right-of-way. And they fully understood that, and they were happy for the opportunity to do so. We went over some of the challenges. There are some technical challenges to get to the property, but it's all feasible with some engineering and some work. So from a technical perspective, it's doable. Again, that's what they really wanted. They wanted to hear that it would be something that they could do, and I advised them of the process. You've laid that out in basically the resolution. So that's really all I can say about this. I mean, we're prepared to work for them, but again, it's council's direction, and we would work with this person to make sure that they complied with our requirements. And so that's really all there is.
Thank you, and I heard back from them after your meeting, and they were very, very happy with your preparation and your willingness to work with them. Just a question to Director Stone about the official plan amendment. What needs to happen for that to happen?
Well, there is, they can do a site-specific amendment for their particular property or properties if they have multiple properties, just to delete or exclude it from section D.5 of the official plan. So that can be, as I said, initiated by any owner in that area, and they would we would process it according to the Planning Act, and then ultimately council has the opportunity to adopt it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fellner.
Thanks. Peter, the agreement that you're going to propose to execute with them, is it going to specify any kind of standards that this has to be brought up to, or is it simply just to grant access, or what? Can you just?
No, I explained to them that if they wanted it to be, if it were up to a municipal standard that was acceptable to us, that the township would be able to provide year-round access to the lot. Otherwise, they just have to be able to make an access. But we were talking more about having a year-round access.
Okay, thank you. Yep, thanks, Pete.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to Director Stone. I believe John Jackson actually made a submission to the official plan review with respect to this item. And I'm hopeful that you have got a copy, but based on your reaction, I'm not having that confidence that you actually have seen that request.
No, what I would suggest is better to have a privately sponsored or applied amendment, mainly because I think it would go through the process much quicker than waiting for the official plan review to be concluded.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Are you aware, though, that John Jackson had made a submission with regards to this?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Okay. So are you then, just that comment, are you then going back to the parties to initiate that, or are you leaving it to them to initiate it with you, Director Stone?
Well, I think if the resolution is passed, then it affords Peter and I the opportunity to talk with two.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Basically, what the resolution does is direct staff to contact Mr. Stivrins and that group to go to the next step, both on the road right away and on the official plan. So that's what the resolution talks about. So we have a resolution on the floor. All in favor? Thank you. And that's carried. Okay, Peter, this one's exciting. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby approve the concept created by Steenhoff Building Services Group for the restoration of Structure 27, which is a bridge, on the Rose Point Recreational Trail, as per staff report PW-RD-2020-020, copy attached as Schedule A to this resolution, and that Council does hereby authorize staff to tender for the restoration of Structure 27, the bridge on Rose Point Recreational Trail. Could I have a motion from Councillor Vincent?
I so move.
And could I have a seconder from Councillor Moffat?
I'll second that.
Peter, do you want to take us through this before we start taking questions?
Sure. We've been maintaining the bridges on the Rose Point Trail for quite a long time, along with all the other bridges in the township. And we've done incremental work to the bridge over time. We've done some work on the abutments. We've done some work on the deck. We've stabilized and made sturdy and monolithic the whole bridge deck. And the final thing that has to be done is really the support to remove some of the piles that are underneath the deck because they're rotten, and it's time they have to be replaced. The beauty of this particular design is that it doesn't go anywhere near the water. Typically, piles are straight down and vertical, and underneath is a Boyne River. So this simplifies it a lot by putting blocks, basically abutments right up against the existing abutments, and then using structural steel to create a truss and integrate the actual deck of the bridge in one piece. So not only is it simple, it's really very easy to construct because it's basically a mechano set that you put together on site. It's constructed by a fabricator and then assembled, but it's also something that has potential for a lot of other snowmobile bridges and so on that are far in the bush and they need some support. It's a very interesting and very unique design, and it's within the budget. It's in the budget. It's been in the budget for this year, next year, and the year after. And the numbers fall into approximately where we want to be. Of course, we have to go through the tender process. And the structural element has already been designed, so it's feasible. It's also, I think it's beautiful design, and I think it's something that, from my perspective, will be a landmark in this area for a long time. And so I'm looking forward to your support to complete it. If this isn't done, there'll be some difficulties with the existing bridge, and there'll be some repercussions later that the bridge may have to be replaced. But that's really would be a real shame because we've done incremental work really to get to this point. So.
Thank you very much. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. So Peter, we're coming into the modern age. On a recent visit to Portugal, their highway overpasses are constructed in this way. No more concrete. Very little concrete, all steel. They've been doing it for years now, and we're finally catching on here in Canada. Good to see. It's the way to do it.
Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with the design, Peter. I think it's really quite something. I guess I'm going to ask you, in the tendering process, is it your intent? I mean, I'm a little disturbed about the possible liability aspect of it. So is it going to be your intent to have Steenhoff tender this on the township's behalf?
Steenhoff would be actively involved in the inspections during the construction, yes.
Yeah, no, that's not what I asked. I asked whether they were going to prepare the tender.
That's
sure that the appropriate builder, the builder's risk insurance and that type of thing, the appropriate insurance is there.
I think we let Michelle would like to speak to this.
Yeah.
We prepare a fair number of tenders, but we do use our engineers and our professionals to help us with the tender documents to make sure that everything's included.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I just want to say that Peter presented this to the Rose Point Trail Committee last week, and they loved it. They're very excited about this as an interesting new piece on the Rose Point Trail. So I just thought I'd add that.
Great. Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Peter, this $150K, which is the estimated budget cost of this structure, is this going out on RFP?
It's the tender.
we just talked about it would be going under a tender.
Yeah.
It would. Okay, good. It's okay. As long as it's not single sourced, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
Just in terms of the deck bed or the deck itself, then Peter, that will have to get regular maintenance and everything else. This is just the underneath to hold up the bridge.
Yeah, this is not the end of, like any wooden structure, it requires a maintenance schedule. However, this will permanently remove the outside of the life of the steel, and it'll be corrosion protected and so on and so forth. But essentially, this is going to be the exoskeleton that holds that bridge up for years.
So I'm looking on page 3 of your report, Peter. Am I correct to presume that the legs are, as removed, are actually removed then? And
yes.
Okay.
Totally gone because they're
replaced.
They're at the end of their useful life.
Okay. And what about the other legs that are underneath holding up this bridge? It looks like there's 2 on each end, and I'm presuming that they will eventually need maintenance or will continue to need maintenance. And this is just sort of the middle, structure to hold up the bridge.
No, if you look at the first figure, you'll see that the bridge is designed and will be completely supporting the existing deck. So the first one was a concept. This is the actual engineering structure that's going underneath it. So you can see it's really like what's so cool about it is it's like a truss that's built around a main beam. So it's a fusion of what's there, and it's the support it needs for a long period of time. So it's a really clever, very nice design, in my opinion.
So I'm looking now on page 2, just to clarify. So the outside legs are of no use once this structure gets built?
No. No,
Yeah. Basically, the first one was a concept. The second drawing that you see is a structural detail of what they're doing. So the first was a concept. We're into the structure itself is what you see in the first figure.
Sorry, sorry, Peter. After your report, then, is what you're referring to.
The first is the concept, and these are the engineering documents that followed up behind it.
Again, page 76 of the council package is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Is the engineer? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I was. Okay.
No, again, you know what they're doing is by doing the steel bracing and the crossers and so on in the exoskeleton there. Those existing piles that are there could last longer because they're not rotten at the bottom. Those are on the ground, so they would require maintenance. But at this time, if they do the bridge, you might as well do the whole understructure to support it for a longer period of time. So
okay,
you're taking some maintenance out of it. You still have the deck to deal with.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, Peter.
No problem.
Councillor Fellner.
Yeah, Peter, what, oh, am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. Peter, what approximately is the span of this thing?
It's 110 feet.
Yeah, really. So how long, using this concept, how long a span do they think they could, use this thing for some of the other bridges in the system?
Yes. They've created a model for this, and I believe they'll be available to look at other opportunities to use this structure. They're
right, because I'm just comparing your budget to what is budgeted for some of the other ones to fix them in a conventional manner, and this is a lot less money.
There's a couple bridges on the trail out towards Sprucedale that might benefit from something like this. I've been to that one.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Well, as Councillor Osborne pointed out, there are many highways in Europe that use something very, very similar to this, and they're a whole lot longer than 110 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Collins, you have your hand up.
Oh, no, I'm fine, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Osborne.
Just some clarification, Peter, from my own curiosity. Looking at the exoskeleton, I see at the ends of the bridge of verticals going up underneath.
Yes.
When I look back to page 3 of 4, the two images, it looks as though those angled verticals are pinned into concrete ballasts at the bottom.
Yes, they are.
And it looks as that beyond that, is that, if you look on the left side of that image, that's the portion, it looks like concrete saddled on a crossbar near those footings. Is that true? Is that concrete?
Those are large concrete footings that the A-frame sits into, and then there'll be vertical piles that go up underneath the exoskeleton. The first was a concept, and as they did the work, they realized that by just making that simple extension of the beam and then a straight up vertical pile that could eliminate the wood.
So on that top picture of the two pictures, page 3,
Yes,
if you look at the left side, you've got
yes,
the crossbar across the angled verticals, and then from there up, is that concrete to the floor of the bridge? Or is that wood?
everything you see in the blue structure is,
There.
or into
There.
the,
The vertical, gray verticals on top, it looks like they're saddled on the crossbar. Can you see it?
yes, those would be steel.
They're steel going up to the deck.
Those would be steel coming straight out of the A-frame rests on concrete, and that'll be a concrete footing, and the pile will go straight up and support a lateral beam.
So those vertical gray, 3 or 4 vertical grays that are saddling on the orange crossbar, they're concrete?
Those will be removed and will be replaced by what's in the image of the exoskeleton that you see. Take a look into the 4th page of the report, the image.
Yes. With steel.
Turquoise
With
vertical.
steel. Okay, I got you. Right up to the deck of the bridge.
So it was just an iteration. It was a
Yeah,
concept.
okay.
And
You
they
just-
said,
you got
okay,
a little confused by several photos of the same thing, several models of the same thing. I've got it now.
those are the, all right,
Thank you.
no problem.
Okay, thank
Pretty
you.
thick.
I think this is exciting, Peter, and
It
it's
is.
innovative, and I think you're right. It will be a place to look at. So we have a motion on the floor to approve this and authorize Peter to go to tender on this. All in favor? Thank you.
All right, good,
Great, Peter.
Good one, Peter.
Well done.
thank you.
Problem-
Thanks,
I don't think you want to go away yet, okay, Peter. I'm afraid you're still on. Discussion on rumble strips between you and Councillor Fellner to lead the discussion. There's
You
no
want to
paperwork.
start, Terry?
Who wants to lead? So Peter and I had a long chat earlier this week on this very subject, and I think we've come up with a good practical approach. And I think Peter has, and the rumble strips will be coming out shortly anyhow for the winter season, correct, Peter? And
That's
then-
correct.
And then we're going to try to, then Peter's going to try to get some data on some hard data we can use utilizing his new equipment,
Yes,
and then work over an approach over the winter in order to get some controls in place to keep the speeds down on those roads. So, and we're going to seek some input from the neighborhood as well to see if they have solutions. So to see if we can come up with an approach which will satisfy the neighborhood as large. I think that's what Peter came up with. I think is a very good idea, and I think it has the best chance for success. But we keep in mind that public safety is the issue here. So
if it's
How are
not,
you gonna collect public input?
we're going to go and we're going to ask some of the people in that live in the neighborhood what they suggest.
Oh, no. Mayor, is this in the
Councillor
addendum?
Osborne.
Is this in the addendum? I can't find it.
There's no I told you there's no paperwork for this. It's a discussion item that was brought forward by Councillor Fellner. There's no paperwork.
Some of
It's not even
the
a
people that live in the neighborhood have come up with some suggestions,
Oh,
so
we tried that.
we'll
with-
look at those.
We tried that with sidewalks, Terry. It's all with a map. I thought the original plan was to just have the strip on one access point, either Humphrey or Sandy Plains or one or the other, not both. Is that true or not, Peter?
no, it's not. it was in the report that there would be, both accesses would have a rumble strip. Because if you put it in one, then everybody will go to the other one. So what our plan is if it's not done today, it would be done tomorrow. Is the radar signs will be removed from Rosso right now. We've got lots of data for that.
Good.
And now we're going to put them into Humphrey Drive in pretty well the same locations where they were.
Good.
And now we're going to see what kind of data we get. I won't go into any more details publicly, but we will put them up and we'll collect data and we'll see what we get.
Good. Sounds like a plan. Thanks.
Councillor Moffat.
So going back to the radar equipment, is the plan, and I think I asked this question when we first got the equipment, and now that you've had maybe a month or so, is the plan to put the radar equipment in various areas within the township for certain periods of time to collect the data, and this is location number 2 in the plan?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So we should see it being moved in the beginning of November to another location within the township?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, again, if you get a period of, 20 or 7 to 14 days, and we're going to move it over into Humphrey right around Thanksgiving. So that'll be a real good indicator for traffic and so on, and times and all that. So, and then once we've got the data, it's there. We've got collected it all. It's on the spreadsheet, and we're preparing a couple reports off of what we got from Rosso. And then we're just doing it as areas pop up. It'll be really good next year, but we're getting experience with it now.
I just hope it lands itself on Rankin Lake Road or Horseshoe Lake Road, because residents have raised concerns about speeds.
Of course.
So, thank you.
This one here, the reason we're moving it over to Humphrey Drive right now is just or not Humphrey, Sandy Plains, is because of the timing of some of the issues we wanted to resolve. It would be a perfect opportunity to put it there.
No disputing, Peter. No disputing. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
I just wanted to ask Peter if there's going to be like, are you going to put it in places by request, or as I'm talking about the signs, when you move them around, do you need to know where the people think they're needed? I'm just asking if there's should I ask for certain places when you get a chance to be done, is what my question is. Or are you just going to have a schedule of you're going to put them around Seguin?
We're not going to put them random. The input comes from the community.
Well,
So,
I mean, we have problems, but nobody said to me, you have to say, I want them on 632 and I want them on. So if I do want them, then I have to request, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. It's a community. It's going to go all over the place wherever we have a problem. Okay. And you're the representatives of identifying problem areas. So,
well, I know my problems are very well known by everybody. I got problems, but it's okay.
That's why you were the first one.
But I still have more problems, so I just want to make sure that I get to my problems. Anyway, thank you.
I mean, it is complaint driven, whether it comes through councillors or from the public talking about excessive speed. And so we've got 2 of these. We'll go where people have pointed it out. I know Peter's discussion with the OPP with the data, and they can act now. That's what they wanted.
Well, people are so happy, Peter. I have to say, I've had so many people call just to say, when people are speeding, they say it's okay because Peter's looking after that. The township's looking after us. So it's really interesting to see the comments. I've gotten so much positive feedback. You have no idea. Everything I've done in this last 2 years is nothing compared to those signs. They think that they're so happy. So anyway, thank you.
Peter the cop.
Anyway, thank you. They're really, really happy.
If they're so successful and they really work, then we may mount them permanently, right? Then we buy some extras and mount them permanently in areas. But we can determine all that now.
Okay, thank you very much. I know they're having an impact on some people. So So the next item is just simply, page
One more.
79, it's just, more reporting back on the Muskoka Regional Broadband Initiative. And you can start to see that there's some governance starting to come into play. We are working very well with Blue Sky and, the Muskoka Economic Recovery Task Force out of the district. The core group, it continues to meet. It's just really for your information and questions. So we have number 10 on the addendum, right? The agenda first, okay. We have a bylaw number 2020-102, being a bylaw to write off taxes on properties in the Township of Seguin, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and a third time. Could I have a motion from Councillor Cole?
I will so move.
And seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you. And this is the one that appeared on your addendum. And this is coming back. This was moved originally by Terry Fellner and seconded by Ted Collins on June 15th. That bylaw number 2020-055, being a bylaw to write off taxes on properties in the Township of Seguin, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. And you'll recall that this one was deferred at that time because the demolition had not been completed. The demolition was completed on October 1st. So, all in favor of deferring, writing off the taxes at this point? Thank you very much. So, did I just sign it now and date it?
Yes, please.
Great. Oops, I'll find another page. Okay, Michelle, Chief Administrative Officer's report.
So the report's in the package, and it's, again, I'm always amazed at how little it looks when I compare to how busy we are. The one thing that I did want to bring your attention to is that the airport agreements for our applications are not in this package. We still don't have anything from the province. We expect that we're going to get that shortly, so I imagine that we're probably going to have a special meeting with council between now and the 16th of October, just to deal with that specifically. So.
Anybody have any questions for Michelle? Looks like maybe Councillor Moffat has a question? Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I was trying to do two things. We passed a bylaw with regards to the Rosso Market and closing the road. Do we have to reverse that now that they're going to be on the waterfront?
No, we just don't implement it, but
okay.
Yeah, they're much more comfortable down at the waterfront.
Okay, thank you.
Council had originally suggested that, so council has some foresight. But I hope everybody will be able to attend and that they get the weather they need. Thanks, Michelle. I want to just say to Michelle, it does look like very little when it's in writing. She's been busy and she's been incredibly active in many aspects of both Treasury and CAO. She did indicate that there might be a beach coming up in the future because she's had it. So as soon as Jason's on side, I know she's done a fabulous job of being a CAO. So thank you very, very much. And you'll recall that she retains the CAO position until 1 week after Jason comes to give him a bit of a chance to organize. But we are looking forward to having him, but Michelle's not going anywhere either for the short term.
Transition.
Yeah. So we have council reports. Can we start with Councillor Moffat in Ward 1?
I guess Foley Matheson Beach is perfect for Michelle in November.
I don't think that's what she had in mind.
You won't have to worry about customs or travel airplanes or anything. All right. I was also on the Muskoka Watershed Council meeting with Michelle. And I sent her an email and I said, thanks for coming out. Always some interesting discussions on the Muskoka Watershed Council. Also attended the committee meeting the subsequent week, and it looks like they're going to continue to do sort of a back-to-back, once every quarter committee meeting and then once every quarter working group meeting. So also attended the Safe Quiet Lakes stakeholder meeting, and I know the mayor was on there as well. I thought we were going to get grouped together in the breakout session. That went really well. It's hard to, I'm actually starting to teach courses starting Wednesday night, and having to organize all that and these breakout sessions and all that other stuff is going to be a bit of a challenge. So they did a really good job, I think, and similar issues. And, you know, we just continue to plug along. I did suggest that on the decimal that they should consider electric boats and electric Sea-Doos, and that would reduce the noise. Yes, I thank you, Councillor Coles. So that's that was one of the ones that didn't get mentioned on the call. I had my residents meetings last week. Had a few residents show up under COVID protocols, and that's a bit of a challenge to try to get people to think that they need to just cannot show up spur of the moment. They actually have to, you know, I have under my agreement with the township, I have to ensure that they agree to those protocols. So several museum meetings ongoing, and then another busy week with some other meetings this week. So that is it on my notes. So I'll pass the baton to Councillor Coles. Thank you.
Okay, yes, it has been busy. You will recall the DAG situation where we gave approval for him to put a trail into his property. That's an ongoing saga, and I've been meeting with his neighbor to try and work out a solution that doesn't require what we had approved. So we're actually working on that. He's meeting with his neighbors on Thanksgiving weekend, and they are going to have a community walkabout and see if they can agree on something. So keep your fingers crossed. It's not a dead issue. It's very much alive. So, and we may actually go out. I'll get Tom or somebody to come out with me, and we'll go and check where the property boundaries are, because that's in question as well, which makes a huge difference as to where this thing can go or whether you can use the existing one. So we're working on it. A group of us, and I'm sure Terry and Ted will talk about this too. We met at Wellington's last week with Darren O'Brien to talk about the village of Seguin North. In other words, the property that we had talked about for boundary expansion for Parry Sound is under a new discussion to look at affordable housing. And an exciting proposition. Some of the property owners think this is the best thing that they have seen since the early discussions about the boundary expansion by Parry Sound. So we've asked Darren to make a presentation at our November, probably the 16th meeting, so that our new CAO can be part of the process and understand what we're talking about. Really exciting. So a lot of work has to go into this engineering stuff, and Terry can talk more about that side of it than I can, but it's exciting. Belvedere meeting on the 23rd. I think two things out of the Belvedere meeting. We are beginning discussions now with West Parry Sound Health Unit or Health Center to talk about more responsibility going to the hospital and how we divulge some of our current responsibilities, and the hospital takes over more. And which in the end, as we've talked about, will save everybody money. And we've also, the Belvedere will have its budget ready for November, so that will feed into our process more timely than it did last year. So we've asked for them to do their first budget presentation to us in November. So yes, also meeting with on the Burkett Road situation. Burkett Road is one of our seasonal roads, and there's 4 residents on it now. It used to be 1. They're demanding, they want snow removal this year. We're not committing. We said no, but we did agree to some road improvements, which will make their spring traffic much, much better. So that happened. The individual looking after it out there is very adamant that he gets snow removal, and you know, within a year or two, I'm sure we'll be able to do it, right, Ted? That's what we're hoping. Rose Point Trail meeting on the 30th, where Peter showed us the bridge concept. They love it, so we've got some lots of support there. And a three-legged lake meeting. Peter's been doing some work. The Works Department's doing work on three-legged lake on the ramp to the launch, which is part of the Ministry of Natural Resources, part of the park, Massasauga Provincial Park. The road down to it has been a problem for years, and the guys within 2 days had begun to do some major changes, but the Lake Association wanted to be involved, and they thought the park superintendent should be involved and the Ministry of Natural Resources. But Peter's got it all covered. Everybody's happy, and the road will be just so much better than it was before. So anyway, that's been my week.
Sounds busy. Councillor
It
Osborne.
was.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to hear, Art, that you've got negotiations underway. Hopefully we can rescind that exemption in the near future. I've had no meetings except for the recent EMS meeting. There hasn't been an OPP CPAC meeting for a year now. I figured that since the new OPP detachment is open, that they would call a meeting, at least virtually, but that doesn't appear to be happening. One question I had for Peter, I think he's still around. I missed on the discussion about the radar and the strips. Are the strips coming off, Peter?
Yes, we're going to be taking them off for winter operations anyway. So it's just the timing right now is just sort of accelerated a bit because
You're putting the signs in.
we're putting the signs there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor Fellner.
Yes, can you hear me?
Not much.
My internet has been sort of problematic the last 5 minutes or so. Okay, I'll take a stab at it.
No.
Library board meeting, we had the first one since the summer. The decision was made. I believe they're going to there'll be a few from the board come to speak to council in the next meeting after the advise of where we are and where we'd like to go, considering COVID. Sat in that meeting with Art, so I'll be interested to see the presentation when it shows up at council. And had a couple of calls about from some ratepayers about some issues, one which Mr. Stone resolved on my behalf, which was nice, and the other one Peter did. So that's all. I think I have a museum meeting too. So and that's all I have to report.
Councillor Collins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I also had a busy last couple of weeks. We had a special DSAB meeting regarding affordable housing on the 30th of September. I have another meeting on the 8th of this week. I just got my agenda today. I'm dealing with constituents' concerns, especially with Peter and some road issues, especially over on Linbury Drive right now, because we're taking that on as a full service municipal road. I also had a meeting with my fellow councilors on economic development plan, Seguin North settlement, and Burkett Road with Art. Thank you, Art. I appreciate your attendance there, and we will get her done. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
I had a DSAB meeting, which was about affordable housing in the north, and I also had a cemetery meeting. The cemetery meeting, we discussed photographing the monuments, something in the future, maybe having students do it, and we'll bring that to council later. I have had lots of phone calls. Well, first of all, I want to say lots of positive phone calls about the traffic monitoring. People are really, really happy. I've also had a lot of compliments about the bathrooms in Rosso, the new washroom. Like, people are so happy. It's working really well. The store owners are over the moon. Like, it has changed their outlook on things. The garbage pickup is going well without the student. Craig and Tony are doing a good job of doing their share of taking away the garbage. Other than that, just a lot of phone calls regarding situations. There's an MTO situation, as I think Peter is aware, on Highway 140, Highway 632, which I've become like all entwined in. So I'm dealing with that, and things are going along well. And Peter's been very helpful with that. And other than that, everything is good. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne, you have a question of someone?
Just one thing I forgot to mention. I took a drive down Turtle Lake Road, Peter Kopish. The work appears to be complete. Job well done, and I certainly appreciate the parking area being filled with the turnaround for the boat ramp on Turtle Lake. Thank you.
Just a very brief update. I met with the heads of council on September 24th. It's interesting, the issues are through all the townships, there's a shortage of all workers, not only to applications for the townships, but shortage of housing for them, shortage of contractors, and it's everywhere. So it is an issue for us. On October 2nd, Director Stone and JJ and I met with the chair and some board members and the executive director of an organization called the Seeds of Eco Communities. And they have chosen Seguin as one of their most favorite locations to build 5 to 10 off-grid homes they are sustainable type of people. They want to be off-grid, they want to be sustainable in terms of growing their own food and that kind of thing. And my question was, are you looking for grant land from Seguin? No. They've got a bunch of realtors out looking to buy up to 100 acres. And they've got the money to buy it. So Director Stone was great in that, he told them about the bylaws. They know a lot about the building code and bylaws and that kind of thing. And we just kind of said, come back to us when you have some land and a plan. They have toured all over North America and part of Europe to see other sustainable communities. So it'll be interesting to see what they come back to. It's all in their court. Also on October 2nd, I was invited to participate with the Women Mayors of Ontario, with the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, and it was a very fascinating meeting. The subject was, how has COVID-19 affected women? And Marianne Monsef, the Federal Minister of Women, was there, and Minister Jill Dunlop from Ontario were also there. And we talked a lot about pandemic economics, and there was a labor economist on the call. It was fascinating. And just one thing that was said that I felt was really important. Since COVID, less than 40% of the daycare spots in Ontario have been able to reopen, and they probably won't reopen. And one of the ministers said, if only 40% of the roadways reopened after COVID, people would be doing something. And nobody's doing anything about the daycare. And that's keeping all kinds of women out of the workforce. It was a fascinating meeting, and we're going to meet every 2 months, the Women Mayors of Ontario, as organized by the Governor General, or the Lieutenant Governor. And I just want to reiterate what Michelle said. We have a contribution agreement from one level of government for the airport. We are waiting for the other one. We have a deadline of October 16th. Norm Miller's office and I are reminding them that Thanksgiving's in the middle of this timeline, and we will be calling a special meeting of council to get the airport funding signed back before the 16th, but we don't know when it'll happen. But be on alert. And other than that, I just want to say to everybody, please have, I see your hand up, Councillor Moffat. that everybody should have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. Come to the Rossell Market if you can, but be conscious that COVID, physical distancing, and masking is still very, very important in our region to keep the numbers low. So enjoy Thanksgiving, but be safe. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you send me that contact information for the sustainable communities? Because I think that would be.
Yeah, I can send you their PowerPoint
Yeah,
and their website.
Yes, that would be great, because I think that's something that we could maybe have them speak at an ICECAP meeting.
They, one of their board members is on the board of Georgian Bay Biosphere.
Okay, I look forward to the information. Thank you.
And one of their board members is from Shawanaga. That's how they landed on Seguin. So I'll send you what I have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the board and committee agendas and minutes and the correspondence presented on the agenda and addendum for the October 5th meeting of Council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner? Okay, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Collins.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. And I have bylaw 2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of meetings of council is hereby deemed and read a first, second, and third time and passed. Councillor Simpson? And could I have a seconder from Darrell Moffat?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you. The Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this regular meeting of council at 7:19 p.m. to meet again on Monday, October 9th.
I
like it.
Getting better, Ann.
Could I have a motion from Councillor Cole
So move.
and seconder from Councillor Osborne?
I second that early motion.
Don't forget, we started at 3:30. But it's much more livable time. So thank you very, very much, everybody. And Craig and I, you have to vote on this. All in favor of adjourning? Craig and I will touch about the special meeting as soon as we can. But have a good and safe Thanksgiving, everybody.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving.